The date was October 23, 1944, deep in the cold and rain-soaked forests of Belgium near the German border, where the autumn sky hung low and heavy above a landscape already torn apart by years of war. The dense fir trees stood like black pillars against the shifting mists, and the muddy forest floor was scarred with trenches, shell craters, and the half-rotted remains of old defensive positions. German soldiers, many hardened by years of combat from the Eastern Front to Italy, moved quietly among their dugouts as they prepared for yet another American offensive. They had fought innumerable opponents by this stage of the war, and had learned to distinguish the disciplined, the inexperienced, the reckless, and the methodical by their first hours on the battlefield. Weeks earlier, reports had begun circulating through German headquarters about a newly arrived American infantry division, the 104th Infantry Division, the Timberwolves. They were described as fresh troops from the United States, men who had never experienced real combat. To the Wehrmacht veterans, this description signaled an easy opportunity. The Germans had faced green American units before, most notably at Kasserine Pass, and experience had taught them that fresh American formations often cracked under the first violent counterattack. Many officers whispered confidently that these new arrivals would break just as quickly. But the German assumptions were based on an incomplete understanding. What they did not yet grasp was that the 104th Division was commanded by a man whose name carried weight far beyond his rank. This was a leader who had already reshaped the character of one legendary American division and had survived a political downfall at the height of his success. He was a figure so aggressive, so unconventional, and so relentless in his expectations that even his own superiors found him difficult to control. The Germans would soon learn his name through bitter experience: Terry de la Mesa Allen, the general whose return to combat would alter their perception of American infantry forever. To understand why German forces eventually learned to fear Allen's methods, one must return to the origins of the man himself. Terry Allen's life began on April 1, 1888, at Fort Douglas in the Utah Territory, a frontier outpost that embodied the unfinished edge of the American West. He was born into a family bound by generations of military service. His father, Samuel Allen, had lived the life of a professional soldier in the rugged expanses of the frontier, enforcing order, engaging in skirmishes, and raising his children amidst the discipline and austerity of isolated army posts. The military heritage extended through his mother's side as well. His maternal grandfather, Captain Carlos Alvarez Bellamesa, had served with distinction in the Union Army during the American Civil War. He fought in the brutally contested fields of Gettysburg, specifically within Company C of the 39th New York Volunteer Infantry. This regiment, mostly composed of Italian immigrants, earned its reputation in some of the war's bloodiest engagements. In the summer heat of July 2, 1863, during the vicious fighting in the Peach Orchard and Wheat Field, locations where the Union and Confederate armies collided with catastrophic ferocity, De la Mesa suffered a severe wound. The carnage of that day left fields covered in casualties within hours. He survived his injuries, continued serving, and carried the scars of Gettysburg for the rest of his life. His endurance and devotion to service would echo through his grandson decades later on the battlefields of Europe. Growing up on frontier military posts meant that Terry Allen was shaped by the harshness and discipline of cavalry life. Horses, weapons, dusty drill yards, and the rigid etiquette of military society formed the environment of his childhood. He learned to ride before most children learned to run, and he developed a familiarity with firearms long before he studied literature or mathematics. The culture of these remote posts valued physical courage, decisiveness, and self-reliance, qualities that Allen absorbed naturally and later applied uncompromisingly in combat. In 1907, Allen received an appointment to the United States Military Academy at West Point, the pinnacle of military education in the country, and the institution responsible for producing many of America's most accomplished commanders. Yet West Point was built upon academic rigor, strict discipline, and a complex social hierarchy, conditions that clashed with Allen's restless temperament. Mathematics, a core subject essential for engineering and artillery, challenged him persistently. His inability to conform to the Academy's rigid structure, combined with academic failures, resulted in his dismissal from West Point in 1911. For most young men, such an event would have marked the end of any hope for a military career. But Allen was not most men. Determined to serve, he sought another avenue. He enrolled at the Catholic University of America in Washington, D.C., earned his degree in 1912, and through persistence and recommendation, secured a commission as a second lieutenant in the cavalry on November 30th of that year. He was soon assigned to the border regions of the American Southwest, where tensions between the United States and revolutionary Mexico created constant instability. In 1913, he led a patrol of 6 men against a band of 30 armed cattle rustlers. Conventional doctrine urged caution in such situations, recommending waiting for reinforcements. But Allen's instincts favored decisive action. He attacked immediately. The confrontation ended quickly, with most rustlers killed or captured. The success of this mission marked one of the first recorded examples of Allen's bold, sometimes audacious approach to leadership, an approach that would later define his conduct in both World Wars. When the United States entered World War I in 1917, Allen, like many ambitious young officers, longed to serve overseas. He eventually deployed to France in 1918. Initially, he served not in direct combat, but as a logistics officer in the 315th Ammunition Train, responsible for the critical but dangerous task of transporting artillery shells to the front lines. Later, he was given command of a battalion in the 358th Infantry Regiment of the 90th Division. It was here, amid the trenches, forests, and brutal offensives of France, that Allen refined a tactical method that would become his trademark, the night attack. Traditional commanders feared the confusion, disorientation, and communication breakdowns that night operations could bring. But Allen saw opportunity. Darkness concealed movement, suppressed enemy fire effectiveness, reduced casualties, and enabled surprise. He simplified tactics for his soldiers, creating clear, repeatable methods for advancing silently, maintaining formation, and identifying objectives without light. His battalion executed several successful nighttime maneuvers during the Saint Mihiel and Meuse-Argonne offensives. In October 1918, during one of these assaults, Allen was struck in the face by enemy fire. He refused evacuation, continuing to lead despite his injury. His conduct earned him the Silver Star and 2 Purple Hearts, testament both to his bravery and his insistence on remaining at the front with his men. The interwar years that followed World War I were difficult for ambitious officers. The U.S. Army shrank dramatically. Career progression slowed to a crawl. Officers sought ways to remain relevant. Allen participated in demanding endurance events, including a 300-mile horseback race in 1920, where he finished first. That same year, he won a bronze medal in polo at the Summer Olympics, demonstrating the versatility and athleticism valued in the cavalry. But Allen understood that warfare was evolving. He studied tank warfare, aviation, and the writings of European military theorists. He recognized that the next major conflict would demand coordination between infantry, armor, artillery, and air power, a vision few American officers shared at the time. This foresight paid off. On October 1, 1940, General George C. Marshall, Chief of Staff of the U.S. Army, promoted Allen directly from lieutenant colonel to brigadier general, skipping the rank of colonel entirely, a rare demonstration of confidence. By May 1942, Allen was given command of the 1st Infantry Division, the storied Big Red 1, a formation whose reputation would grow dramatically under his leadership. When American forces landed in North Africa on November 8, 1942, during Operation Torch, Allen's division spearheaded the assault. The environment that followed was unforgiving. The desert, the mountains, and the veteran German Afrika Korps under generals like Rommel and von Arnim tested American resolve. At Kasserine Pass in February 1943, American units broke under pressure, but Allen's leadership helped stabilize the front. At Jebel el Hamra and El Guitar, he proved the fighting spirit of the Big Red One. The division absorbed counterattacks, endured heavy losses, and ultimately contributed to the collapse of Axis defenses in North Africa by May 13, 1943. But success did not shield Allen from controversy. In Sicily, beginning with the landings at Gela on July 10, 1943, Allen's men faced ferocious counterattacks. They held the beaches despite German armor nearly overrunning their positions. At Troina, from July 31 to August 6, they endured relentless assaults. It was some of the fiercest fighting the division experienced. But after 9 continuous months of combat, discipline had eroded. Commanders like Omar Bradley believed that Allen's relentless emphasis on battlefield effectiveness had come at the cost of strict military order. On August 7, 1943, Allen was relieved of command, just days before appearing on the cover of Time magazine for his battlefield accomplishments. Many officers, after such a public and painful removal, would have retired quietly. Instead, Allen requested another command. On October 15, 1943, he was given the 104th Infantry Division. These were young Americans, students, factory workers, farmers, who had never seen combat. Allen knew he had to shape them into something formidable. He pushed them through a training regimen unlike anything the Army had attempted. While other divisions trained for daylight operations, Allen built his around the night attack. Weeks of maneuvers in darkness, 30 to 35 hours of tactical training per week, live fire exercises, and constant repetition forged an elite night-fighting formation. Bradley later admitted that Allen's division was the only one specifically prepared for nighttime operations. So, when the Timberwolves entered combat in October 1944, the Germans expected inexperience. Instead, they encountered something they had not seen before: an American division that attacked with the confidence, silence, and precision of veteran shock troops, often under cover of night, striking swiftly and vanishing just as quickly. As the division advanced toward the approaches to Aachen, the Germans began to feel the cumulative pressure of their tactics. The city of Aachen itself had already seen fierce combat, as American forces fought house by house to seize it from German defenders. The Timberwolves operated north of the city, pushing through towns and villages that the Germans had fortified to block the Allied advance. Each position was defended by soldiers who, despite fatigue and declining resources, remained dangerous opponents. Yet the Timberwolves continued to employ nighttime maneuver, infiltration tactics, and carefully coordinated attacks that forced German units to remain constantly alert. This lack of rest degraded morale and weakened their ability to resist. The psychological aspect of the Timberwolves' methods cannot be overstated. In warfare, few things are more unsettling than an enemy who strikes when visibility is at its lowest, when sound carries strangely, and when one's senses provide unreliable information. German soldiers reported hearing faint movements without being able to identify their sources, seeing shadows that disappeared when investigated, or finding entire positions overrun with little evidence of how the Americans had approached. These experiences, repeated across multiple sectors, created an impression of an enemy who blended with the darkness itself. In mid-November, the American push intensified. The Timberwolves moved steadily, capturing villages and forests that formed part of the German defensive belt. Their pace was not reckless, it was deliberate, persistent, and executed with the professionalism of a unit that understood both its strengths and the terrain. German defenders often launched counterattacks at dawn, believing that nighttime fighting had exhausted the Americans. Instead, they encountered units already positioned defensively, alert, and prepared to repel assaults. This further fueled the belief among German commanders that the Timberwolves possessed exceptional stamina and discipline. By early December, as the weather worsened and the ground froze, the German army prepared for a massive counteroffensive in the Ardennes, a plan that would later become known as the Battle of the Bulge. Although the Timberwolves were not positioned at the center of the attack, the buildup of German forces placed new pressure on their sector. Supplies were stretched thin, and the winter cold added hardship to every operation. Yet Allen's division remained active, continuing nighttime patrols, securing defensive positions, and preventing German units from regrouping or launching local offensives. Their consistent presence along the line contributed to maintaining stability in a period of great uncertainty. Meanwhile, German soldiers continued to discuss this American division that fought like no other. Word spread along the front that the Timberwolves were specialists in night combat, that they trained differently, and that they executed operations with a confidence that set them apart from other American units. Stories circulated of patrols that moved through minefields without triggering them, of assaults that materialized out of the darkness without warning, and of an unseen hand guiding their movements with precision. These stories grew in the telling, as frontline soldiers often share exaggerated accounts to explain repeated setbacks. But behind the rumors lay a core truth. The Timberwolves were led by a general who had mastered a form of warfare the Germans were not prepared to counter. It was during this period that Terry Allen's leadership style became more evident to observers. He often visited the front lines, moving among his troops even during dangerous conditions. He paid attention to morale, spoke individually with soldiers, and ensured that units understood not only their immediate objectives, but the broader purpose of their operations. His presence had a stabilizing effect, reinforcing the sense that their commander trusted them to execute difficult missions. At the same time, he maintained strict accountability for performance, insisting that officers and enlisted men alike adhere to the standards he had instilled during training. He understood that the foundation of effective night fighting was discipline, and he enforced that discipline relentlessly. As December wore on, more engagements tested the Timberwolves' endurance. Fighting in the Dutch countryside demanded patience and adaptability. Dikes, canals, and flooded fields hindered movement. Villages fortified by German troops required systematic clearing. The division rotated units carefully, balancing offensive actions with periods of rest and recovery. Allen knew that exhaustion could undermine nighttime effectiveness, so he took care to preserve the stamina of his men. Even so, the winter campaign strained them severely. Frostbite became common, and the cold seeped into every aspect of daily life. Yet the division continued pressing forward. By early 1945, German High Command had taken notice of the recurring difficulties faced by units opposing the Timberwolves. Reports increasingly referred to this American division by name. Some officers recommended reinforcing sectors threatened by the 104th with additional machine guns or artillery to counter nighttime infiltration. Others urged increased patrol activity at night, though few believed their troops could match the Americans' proficiency in darkness. In some areas, German commanders even shifted reserve units to anticipate nighttime assaults, a clear acknowledgement of the tactical disruption the Timberwolves had caused. Through all of this, Allen continued shaping his division into a cohesive, resilient force. He understood that their success depended not only on their night-fighting skills, but on the trust they had in one another and in their leadership. The soldiers knew that their commander demanded much, but they also recognized that he expected no more from them than he had demanded from the Big Red One in North Africa and Sicily. His career, marked by both triumph and controversy, had led him to this point. The Timberwolves were his second chance, a chance to prove that his methods were not only effective, but essential in modern warfare. As the winter turned to early spring and the Allied advance resumed in full force, the Timberwolves prepared for operations that would carry them across major waterways, through fortified German towns, and deeper into the heart of the Reich. The Germans, now more aware of the division's capabilities, braced themselves for what was to come. The legend of the Timberwolves had begun to take shape, and the next months would cement their place among the most respected and feared American divisions on the Western Front.